was a facilitator for a meditation group through Zoom,
Mhm.
and it grew to over 350 to 500 people, and there were about 12 to 20 breakout rooms running concurrently.
Wow.
Fun.
Yeah, and I was the overall tech for the meeting, and I also
Cool.
trained all the people to run the breakout rooms.
Cool.
All right, we ready?
Yep.
Cool.
All right. What's up, people? Welcome to the Out Loud podcast in conjunction with the Out Loud anthology from Red or Green Books. I don't have a copy with me right now because I'm on the road, but I'm sure one of my lovely co-hosts will hold that up. This podcast is featuring queer LGBTQ voices and their work. And today we got Vex Lex, aka Alexis Garcia, in the building. First, we got my co-host Dougie Fresh, aka Douglas Calla.
What up? What
Caleb.
up?
What up? What up? How you doing, Dougie?
Good, good, good. Yeah, I'm
Good, good. And
doing
we
pretty
got
well.
Starchild.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Cool, cool. Um, so we're gonna do a short little interview with Vex Lex. We'll all ask a few questions, and then Lex, you'll have about 15 minutes to feature your work, talk about your book and things like that.
Okay.
So first things, welcome to the space.
Thank you for having
Welcome.
me.
Yes, how are you today?
I'm good, just relaxing. It's a rainy day, so just been relaxing at home.
All right. So for those, this is going to go on Spotify. It's live on Facebook. It'll be on YouTube. So for those people who do not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Alexis Garcia. I go by Vex Lex. I'm a queer poet from Harlem, East Harlem, and I have been writing for basically all my life. Since I was in the first grade. I write poetry, fiction stories. Um, let's see what else. I'm a paralegal. I'm currently pursuing my master's in legal studies, and yeah, that's pretty much. I like to play video games. That's pretty much it about me.
All right, all right. You in the Big Apple. Are you familiar with my co-host Dougie Fresh?
I believe I've seen Douglas and other Zooms. I'm blanking on which ones, but
Yeah, you may have
I
maybe some like spoken word oriented Zooms, you know?
yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
He got a new facial haircut there. I like it. Um, cool, cool. Tell us about your book. You got an amazing book out. What a beautiful
Yes, so
cover.
yes. So my book, the lighting is probably kind of weird in here. Just see. So I have a book. It's called Ask Me Again in 6 Months. This is the book.
Oh wow.
Amazing cover art by Ella Diem. It was just the overall process was amazing. You know, my first time publishing a book. It's always been one of my dreams. So the book is basically a culmination of all my works over the years. So about 14 plus years of writing. Um, and I broke it up into different sections. So there's like an identity section, a reflection kind of section, love, lust, mental health, and things like that. Just following basic aspects of life that we deal with and how it relates to other people. Um, and I did it from the point of view of, basically myself, as someone dealing with mental health issues, going through these kind of everyday issues that everyone else has to deal with. So kind of trying to relate to other people with the same, problems and issues. Um, and yeah, that's basically, and it was an incredible experience getting it published. I'm always gonna shout out Marissa Prada because it's, having your dream come to fruition, that's how, and especially your first book is always gonna be like your first baby. So it's like it was just an amazing experience.
Right. And that's with Red Green Books,
Yeah,
READ. So you proclaimed yourself a queer artist. How
right.
does your queerness fit into your creativity? For example, like in your book and in your poetry, how does that come through?
So it slowly has been making its way into my writing. I've never really, I guess when I was younger, I've written pieces about like coming out and things like that, or like being confused when I was especially a teenager, being confused about, you know, liking women, and what to do with liking women and how to, pursue that. Um, but as I've gotten older, um, my writing, I'm kind of following this whole thing where I'm embracing the whole confusion of it, I guess, from when I was younger till now, um, of just finding myself through my writing. So
Mm.
kind of, when I was younger, kind of being confused about who I was I bisexual? Was I a lesbian? And just embracing that confusion in my writing. And I didn't include many kind of queer pieces in my book, but some like the gay agenda. There's like a kind of a satire piece called I Hate Men. Was rolling with the punches. So like a few little, here and there kind of, and I've kind of was setting me up for maybe a future book that focuses solely on like sexuality and queerness.
Understood.
I really like that concept of embracing the confusion. Um, I can definitely relate to that. For me, it comes up like around gender stuff. Uh,
Right.
like, yeah, it's such a wild journey, and we it's like we write our way into who we are. Like
Right.
it sounded like that's what you're saying. Yeah, that's cool.
We write our way into what we are. That's a poem right there. I'm proud. Um, so some fun questions. What would you say people misunderstand about Vex Lex the most?
Hmm, that's a great question. I like that. Um, like misunderstand about me as an artist.
Mhm.
Hmm. I feel like this doesn't really happen as much anymore, but some people kind of in the past tended to view me as very problematic, or like she hates men, or like stuff like that, which is not the case. But like the point of being Vex Lex is stuff that kind of frustrates me about certain aspects. uh but and I guess the way my words would come out, it kind of rubbed people the wrong way. Or I guess in another aspect, when I started my Instagram page and I was like promoting my work and stuff like that, there was one person, I'm like never gonna forget them for some reason. It's always like, you get all these compliments, but you remember the one like negative.
Oh,
Yeah.
This one guy, he said that like all my poetry was like too depressing. He was like, I really love your work, but it's too depressing. So when I write, I try I try to like block that out of my head when I'm writing. Um, but it's one thing that kind of always stuck with me. And like when I look over my writing, Um, oh, and then most recently, like with the book, I last year when I was promoting it at my job, and my bosses and my coworkers bought copies. My boss, he kind of was just like, "Oh, your writing is dark." And I don't know, like I've never viewed my writing that way, I guess. So I mean, it's up to everyone's interpretation, but I don't know. I guess I've never I mean, yes, certainly a lot of my poems can be dark, but like to categorize like my poetry itself as dark, I don't know. I feel like there was some kind of misinterpretation there.
Hmm.
Well, and I wonder, because I know that like for me, a lot of times, like you talked about, mental health being a big part of it, and
Right.
the writing process being this like, release and like, getting like kind of getting things out that are not, going to come up like in water cooler conversation at work, like that
Right.
just, really, really going in and like purging, and I feel like that's a lot of times maybe something that people misunderstand about poets, that we're in this process of like healing ourselves, and so
Right.
like, it's like it feels good to write a poem that has some anger or whatever quote unquote problematic feelings in it or something like that because we're getting it out. So yeah, so I guess I'm trying to figure out how to ask the question. But just like yeah, how so like maybe this like do you feel um maybe you could talk about a time when you felt like a sense of release or something like you were able to write through something that just got helps your energy to move, or I don't know if that makes sense or
No, yeah, it makes
um
sense. Um, I mean,
yeah.
there's definitely been plenty of times where like I felt this kind of release through the writing. Off the top, I can think of, I guess when I was going through a pretty bad breakup last year. Um, it happened while like the book was published and things like that. So it kind of was all jumbled up into there's a lot of feelings going on, like trying to be excited about the book being published, but also being sad about a breakup. Um, so I wrote some poems that immediately that like I was able to get out a lot of anger and stuff like that. So that helped. And also whenever I write any of like my mental health pieces, it's definitely a good release. Especially like I say, if I'm having a bad mental health day, it's easy to just write. Well, it's not easy, but I just kind of try to get my thoughts together and put it on paper and just get released that way.
So we spoke about obviously the haters in the comments and then your ex. What other people would you say are important in your life or really become a muse to your creative flow?
Um, I want to say basically that's in a muse. So I would say in certain parts of poetry that I write, anybody basically that I have a crush on could become a muse. Um, I've noticed that during my writing, like, it's either relationships or like situationships. I write a lot about situationships. Like I can look at a lot of my poems, especially in the book, um, where I'm talking about like three different people. Um, and basically, I've been trying to get more into using myself as a muse, but it's kind of hard to write about myself in certain aspects. Like with like the mental health stuff, I can do it, but like um writing about how I view myself can be hard sometimes. So um whether it's just writing about my personal like experiences, like my personal memories, it's kind of hard about like I could write about it more from an objective point of view, but when it comes to really diving into my core memories, sometimes it's hard. So I would say, yeah, mostly my muses are like anybody that I've probably had a crush on.
Do you think there's a do you think there's a correlation between mental illness or mental health struggles and developing romance? And if so, do you explore those themes?
So mental illness, and you said in developing romance, like
Yep.
in relation to what, into writing, like writing about it, or just in
Well,
general?
no, in terms of well, yeah, in terms of how you are able to like how you navigate relationships, like do your mental health struggles play a role in navigating your relationships?
Got it. Oh, definitely. Like especially, I suffer from depression, borderline personality disorder, and BPD itself directly affects your relationships to people, whether it's friendships, romantic relationships, coworkers, things like that. And just navigating that in itself is a struggle. Like I tend to kind of be a lone wolf and kind of to myself because I feel like sometimes how I relate to people is not the way they would relate to me. Um, and like especially when it comes to like developing romantic relationships, it's kind of
I'm on a call.
it's been very difficult. Um, and that I get very over, I get enthralled with the person. That saying of, head over heels for someone, but I kind of lose myself, lose my identity. And that comes out in my poetry sometimes where like I'm just, and I think that's where the poetry helps, because it helps me navigate some of those like feelings of kind of trying to not lose myself so much, but remembering who I am, especially as a poet.
Right.
Yeah, I really relate to just that the kind of enthralledness. So I'm kind of like in some sort of category of like autism and maybe some bipolar, where yeah, where I can get super into something or just and like just get super intense and then kind of like drive people away with that intensity. And but that yeah, so that's but yeah, and it's and of course poetry is a place where we can be like really enthralled and just throw it all in.
Right.
And what I'm curious about is when you talk about that and like kind of losing your sense of self. Um, I'm curious to know more about what that feels like in terms of kind of losing yourself in this like mega crush or just intense feeling.
Well, let's be
So,
honest, everybody knows that liking women willfully is in itself a mental disease,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah, so basically, I mean, yeah, even I mean, sometimes it's kind of a double-edged sword because it's like you want to like somebody, but you want to also set those boundaries for yourself. Um, but the problem I feel like with me and like dealing with like my mental illnesses is that sometimes I go over the boundaries I try to set for myself. So I just completely lose all sense of reality sometimes and concoct these scenarios in my head and kind of go with it. So I'm like losing myself, and I would say I'm losing my identity because I feel like sometimes I assume the identity of the other person and that I take on their likes and their dislikes. And, suddenly I'm forgetting about what I like and what I like to do. And I'm focusing on, oh, what makes them happy. And oh my God, like they're having a better, like I'm focusing more on them and completely ignoring myself, which, obviously you can't do. But that's something that I continue to struggle with. So I try to stay away from anything romantic, but sometimes you can't help it and it kind of reels you in.
That's a fact.
Yeah,
I can relate to that. I do the same thing. I get so enthralled with like what it is that they want in a partner and trying to be that I forget my own needs. So that makes sense. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
well,
off, Starchild.
oh no. Yeah, and there's something like that's just um so artistic about that, like just it because it kind of in my head I'm making a connection with just kind of losing yourself in your art and
Right.
and having this muse that whoa, I just feeling the intensity of the beauty of this other being or whoever it is or whatever it is, just getting lost in it. So yeah, and I love how you're just vulnerable, and sharing like very openly about your struggles. I think that's really beautiful that you're willing to do that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I like to be, especially in my writing now, like the older I've gotten, I like I always say I'm completely an open book. Like I even tell that to I think that could be to my detriment sometimes, like even talking to people that I want to pursue, I always tell them I'm an open book. You can literally ask me anything and I'll answer it. Um, and especially in my writing, like I try to be as vulnerable as possible because I feel like, you know, in certain aspects of our everyday life, we kind of have to wear these masks, like especially when we go to work or if we're just outside walking around or, something like that. Like we put on these masks, we put on these fronts. Um, and when we go home, we're taking off these masks. So it's kind of like I don't want to wear a mask when I'm doing my poetry.
Yeah, that
Love that.
definitely. So one thing that I was curious about, how how are things, if it's okay to ask about this, how are how's like your relationship with like your family and stuff like that? I know that for queer folks that can also sometimes be, challenging and um so I'm just curious.
Oh, you said my relationship with my family?
Hmm.
It's pretty good.
Cool.
It's always a running joke with my mom. That I came out to her when I was like 9 years old. And to this day, she tells me, she's like, how do you not remember the day that you came out to me? I was like, I don't know. I don't remember it. She was like, so apparently it was like the day before my 10th birthday or something. And I just randomly came out of my room and said, Mom, I think I like girls. And then just walked away and left her back,
Oh.
left her baffled. Um, it was kind of a struggle, growing up as a teenager. My mom has always been kind of supportive. But I always felt this need to hide it from the rest of like our family because people like to make little jokes here and there about like what they assume all lesbians look like or what all lesbians do. All lesbians have short haircuts and dress like men or want to be men. Um, and they make jabs about that. So like I always kind of, and especially a Hispanic, coming from a Hispanic family, a lot of times they can be very judgmental, but like as I got older, more of my family found out. And it's just one of those things that no one mentions, but they know. Like I made a mistake one time of posting a picture of me and an ex-girlfriend kissing when I was 19 on Facebook, and I forgot to block a majority of my family. So they all saw it. So that was essentially another coming out. But no one said anything. And then like there's been times here and there where I've had an uncle ask my mom, "Oh, I see Alexis is at the Pride Parade. What is she doing there?" And then, and so different people in my family have found out at different times. I've related to my cousins at a very young age. I've just told them randomly. Um, so it's kind of one of those things where like my family, it's the most important person, that I care about is like my mom and like my stepdad. And they're very accepting, and which I'm grateful for because I've heard, so many horror stories of like people being kicked out or, their family just disowning them. And so well, when I think about like my biological father, when he found out, he kind of said something that kind of bothered me about it. So he met my girlfriend 2 years ago, and he had like this talk with my mom about, like, oh, like she's a lesbian and things like that. And my mom was like, yeah. And his comment was, oh, did something happen to her when she was younger that made her become a lesbian? So that to this day still kind of, gets under my skin that like that was his initial reaction, that, I something would have had to happen to me in order for me to become a lesbian.
Understood.
Hmm.
We have an audience question. Kelly Mary had a question.
I do have a question.
Yeah, what's
Um, do you find that your family struggles with the concept of, or I guess the lack of concreteness in bisexuality or pansexuality or having a more general queer identity as opposed to, as has been said to me, picking a side? Because I find my family either considers me straight or they consider me gay, but they get very confused about the both.
I would say I would say, yeah, my family is kind of also though you kind of have to pick a side. Um, Especially when I was a teenager, like with my mom and just dealing with it. I kind of went through these kind of, I don't want to say episodes, but like these moments of I was like, am I bisexual? Am I a lesbian? And it kind of was always changing. So my mom kind of saw it as I was just confused. Um, so and then and my actual confusion actually fueled that, because I didn't know, I thought some boys were cute, but I found myself more drawn to girls, so it was kind of all over the place. um but yeah, I feel like a lot of families do tend to, you have to pick a side, and like the whole concept of bisexuality and pansexuality, um it's still kind of hard to explain to people. So I think going through that and like, um I guess I did struggle with that a little bit when I was younger, kind of, oh, like I need to pick a side, or something like that. But I feel like, yeah, a lot of people do struggle with that concept.
Um,
It's kind of an Ouroboros of an issue because you don't know how to explain your own confusion to the person. And then because you're confused, they become further confused. And then their
Right,
confusion makes you more confused.
right.
And instead of leading to clarity, it just leads to some very awkward family conversations.
Definitely.
now, what do you want me to call you? I done called you Vex. I done called you Lex. I done called you Alexis. What do you prefer?
You can call me Lex.
All right. So you mentioned that you have, I think you said Latino or Hispanic background.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think your culture plays into it? I know that a lot with myself, with Black culture, there's this undertone of homophobia that always comes up, and luckily, it's not as bad for females as it is for males. But what do you think how your culture plays into that conversation?
Oh, I think definitely with my culture, there's very heavy undertones of homophobia and kind of just the thing, especially with women. I think I feel like, well, I don't want to say no one, but like I feel like a lot of times, especially in like Hispanic cultures, they don't take lesbians as serious as, let's say, gay men. Or, it's one of those things where a lot of times, I've had family members, like I mentioned before, um, that all lesbians have short hair and dress like men or want to be like men. So for me to come out as a lesbian, they kind of look at me like, but you don't look like one. And it's like, what does a lesbian look like? Um, so it's definitely, I feel like definitely in cultures, especially around people of color, the it's very heavy on undertones of homophobia and kind of just confusion and just not being able to understand it, or the unwillingness to understand it, even though, what's to understand, it's you love who you love, it's what's the confusion about that. Um and yeah, it's so definitely a culture thing too. It kind of gets to me sometimes because especially with other cultures and like um I worry about that too. Like when it comes to dating, if I'm gonna date someone, you're essentially sometimes dating their family and like what's their background and are they homophobic and things like that.
We got another audience question from Robert.
Mhm.
Are you writing any new themes that younger people who are in their 20s deal with? If yes, what?
Uh, am I right? Wait, am I writing
Are you writing any new
new
themes
No,
that,
themes.
yeah,
oh,
themes?
themes that young people who are in their 20s deal with? Um, so I'm currently sort of in the process. I've been working to working towards writing a book solely about sexuality and like the whole journey of it. So I feel like people in their 20s kind of there's this kind of sometimes this whole thing of like, oh, you're in your 20s, you should have yourself figured out, or like some kind of, you know, notion of that. But I feel like the book I kind of want to work towards, is dealing with sexuality and like even at my age, I'm 29, but still sometimes fighting with certain feelings sometimes and fighting still with, stuff that I'm internalizing and still being afraid to sometimes even at 29 to be out there fully with someone. Like for instance, I wrote a poem about still being afraid sometimes to kiss a woman on the street. I look twice before kissing them because I am like, who's watching us or like things like that. So I'm still writing about, the struggles that I have to, you know, deal with, especially in, late 20s and then probably still gonna go into my 30s.
Yeah, I also have a poem about that. Not being comfortable, like holding hands and things.
Right.
Yeah. Um, Tell us your favorite childhood memory.
Mhm. So it would have to be, I guess, any summer that I spent in Florida, basically. Um, I wouldn't say it's well, I don't want to say it's a favorite child's memory, but it's one that stuck with me. Um, and it happens to deal with like queerness and things like that. So when I was, let's say, around 8 or 9 years old, I went to Disney World for the first time with my aunt and her friend. And at the time, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I'm like 8 or 9 years old. Um, and just seeing, and then as I got older and looking back on it, I'm just like, wow, like it was an interesting experience to like see, they were, they were hiding, but they were essentially, also out there. And it was interesting to have that kind of experience because, growing up, you didn't really see queerness in cartoons, or like sometimes you did, but you didn't know what it was, or like, so it was good to just have that sort of representation, even though I didn't know what it was at the time. So I guess that's definitely a memory that stuck with me. Um, Favorite memory would just have to be, yeah, any summer that I spent in Florida, basically, because I would just take time, leave New York, go to Florida, spend it with cousins and family, and go to the beach and stuff like that. So we did that almost every summer up until I was like 13. So that was always a fun memory of mine.
That's good. That's good. All right. Let's say hypothetically, we were to build a Vexed Tinder profile. What would you want that to look like?
I don't know. Let me pull up my actual Tinder profile. No, no, but a Vexlex one. Let's see. I would just put in the bio, let's just say, vulnerable poet seeks another vulnerable poet or something like that. Um, and would definitely have pictures of me performing at places. Uh, uh, would have some kind of, I guess, like when you could put the song sometimes in the Tinder profile, would have some song from like the band Skillet, because their music very heavy to me. So I like that. Yeah, basically it. I kind of suck at writing bios sometimes, so I would have to really think about that. And it's funny because I'm like, I'm a writer, but like when it comes to writing a bio about, how putting, what do you put on a dating, like a dating profile bio?
Right, right. All right. Well, we have reached that time. It is 6:45. You have 15 minutes to just share your work, um, show us your book again, and do your thing.
All right. So my book again is Ask Me Again in 6 months, and I'm going to read a few of the queer pieces that I have in there. A few. Um, so the first one, I believe it's called Dear Westboro Baptist Church. And I wrote that back in 2014. And it was because I heard about this church that was, picketing, LGBT events, picketing funerals of, soldiers who were queer and things like that. So I just heard about all the things they did, and I wrote this poem hoping to send it to them one day, but I never did. So it's called Dear Westboro Baptist Church, 7/22/14. As of today, more than 500 Palestinians have been killed, as well as 25 Israeli soldiers. But your concerns lie with the lesbian couple holding hands under the table. And your sympathies lie with the little boy beside them, who in your eyes won't know what it's like to be a man. As of today, 298 people were killed when Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 crashed in the Ukraine after being hit by a Russian missile. But your concerns lie with the sanctity of marriage. And your sympathies lie with the children whose same-sex parents decided to insert themselves into the sacred heterosexual ritual. I mean, after all, 50% of marriages ending in divorce is due to the fact that same-sex couples just want to be in love like everyone else. It has nothing to do with the flings with the secretary, the extra sugar giving to the neighbor, or because daddy likes to love with his fists, or because mommy loves to learn to love back. As of today, more and more innocent children have fallen victim to negligent and violent heterosexual, yes, heterosexual parents. The ones who still haven't learned to care for themselves, but think it fitting to care for another human life. But your values lie with traditional values in an untraditional world. Your sympathies lie with the preteen girl who's just gotten her monthly surprise, but won't speak of it to her two dads. Ask yourself, where is her mother? And why isn't she buying this so-called helpless girl some pads? Instead, she gets them from her two dads. As of today, cops are continuing to abuse their power, causing more deaths than preventing them. But your concerns lie with the rising college freshman who has been eyeing her 17-year-old friend for some time. And your sympathies lie with the 17-year-old parents who are sending those same power-hungry cops on the college freshman for being some sort of pedophile, ignoring and forgetting that 13 and 14-year-olds are dating older guys and no one seems to bat an eye. Pay more attention to the parents who leave their babies in hot cars burning, and pay less attention to the idea of gays burning in hell. Poem. So that was Dear Westboro Baptist Church. And the next poem is called The Gay Agenda, which is one of my favorite poems because I like to think that I'm continuing to perpetuate the gay agenda, whatever that is. So here it is, The Gay Agenda. As a thriving member of what people refer to as the alphabet community, it is in my best interest to continue to perpetuate the gay agenda. Firstly, I would like to address the idea that our goal is to make all children gay, that we have single-handedly infiltrated their favorite cartoons and are looking to brainwash them. I find that hilarious because I grew up watching heteronormative cartoons and still grew up to become a raging lesbian. So who knows, maybe the straight agenda isn't as impactful as the gay one. Secondly, I would like to address the reality of silencing any talks related to sexual orientation, gender identity, LGBTQ history. Yes, I'm speaking to you, Governor Ron Praying Mantis, and all the other politicians looking to follow suit. You can sign bills until your wrists fracture. You can hide behind any convoluted political discourse. Just know we see right through you. Third, this idea that people do not care what someone's preferences are, just as long as they don't parade them around and make a spectacle of it, ties into my fourth point. When people ask, why does our community need to have their own parade? Maybe for the simple fact that we want to be able to celebrate who we are before some of us have to go back into hiding till the next thing comes along. The bottom line is that we aren't looking to make everything gay. If something comes off gay, it probably was already that way. You want your children safe, and so do we. And we want them to know that it is okay to have these feelings. Closets aren't meant for people, no matter how big they may be. And we will not stop until everyone can live without having to apologize for who they love. So that was that piece. Let me see. So another kind of queer piece that I have is called IHM, which stands for I Hate Men. And it's kind of a satire piece. It's kind of a response to ignorant comments that I've heard over the years from men about what a lesbian is or how they can change lesbians. So IHM. Lesbians. They hate all men, probably because they want to be men. I'll let you in on a secret. My hatred of men has nothing to do with me being a lesbian. It's an added bonus. I don't particularly hate all of them, just some. Some men convince themselves that we only exist because we were rejected by them, that our sexual experiences do not count, that penetration by a penis is the only acceptable definition of sex and therefore must be the main form of pleasure. My fingers would beg to differ, and my mouth would love to offer a rebuttal. Some men only acknowledge the existence of lesbians because it turns them on, as if we were meant to cater to some perverted fantasy where we allow them to join. I can assure you that we are just fine with having real orgasms. It would not, and would strongly prefer to not fake them. That is in no way an invitation or challenge to show us what we are missing out on. You may judge us for using dildos, but we prefer to work with equipment that doesn't run out of fuel. Do lesbians hate men? Yeah, sure, why not? But I am a lover of women before I am anything else. So that was that piece. And then I'll guess I'll do maybe one or two mental health pieces since I did talk about that a lot. So let's see. Uh, so my mental health pieces are in my last chapter. It's called Coping. Um, and that's where I focus mostly on like mental health and stuff like that. So I'm going to do my piece, Bloodsucker. Depression is the vampire that watches me when I brush off a laceration as a minor cut. I try to go on about my business as if my skin isn't opening itself up with every breath that I take. I have never felt more exposed. It sharpens its fangs as I struggle to contain the bleeding. It knows I will not call for help in an effort to avoid spilling onto someone else. It bites me when I slowly surrender. I have stopped pouring out for the time being, but I grow weaker. How can I drive this monster away when my 7-day forecast shows cloudy with no signs of sunlight? How can I restore the color in my skin when the days are black and white? It leaves me barely clinging to life. Depression does not intend to finish me off. What would be the fun in that? And then I'll just do one last piece, and it's one of my favorite pieces to do. It's called Couples Counseling with My BPD. I'm sorry about all the rescheduled appointments, I tell the counselor. I tried to mask my disappointment. I finally got them to come with me. You see, they say, she is already putting the blame on me. So what brings you two here today? Well, they say, she uses me like a crutch that when things are overwhelming and life seems too much, I'm always the reason. Well, you are the reason I don't believe in myself since you take hold of me and cause me to second guess my thoughts. You taught me that everyone is meant to leave. They are, don't you see? In the end of it all, the only one to stay is me. I don't know who I am because you're all there is to know. Whose fault is it that you really can't let go? Do you know what it feels like to not be seen? Do you know what it's like to not be seen? To always take the blame for this life you created. If you never existed, I would be elated. Because from heartbreaks to minor inconveniences, I can't help but to be devastated. Life is what you make it. I am more you than you realize. Get your head out of the clouds and accept what's right in front of your eyes. You see, doctor, our arguments go nowhere. I'm fighting with myself like some kind of freak. The counselor finishes jotting down her notes. So, same time next week. Thank you. Those are my pieces.
Man, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah, so many gems in all of them. And so I'm a therapist, and so I love the BPD one, and the concept of doing it as like a couples therapy session
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And then the counselor is just like, okay, see you next week. You know, it's like, oh God, counselor.
Thank you.
So what's next for Vex Lex?
What's next for me? So I did mention that I kind of want to work on a second book, a second poetry book, that deals with solely with just sexuality from, when I was a teenager up until present day. I'm also working on a novel that's loosely kind of based off of the Pulse nightclub shooting that happened in Florida. It's fiction, but it was inspired by that event. Um, so I want to do a second poetry book, and I want to also publish a novel. So got some things in the works. I have to, just be more on top of my writing, and I've written a lot of a way more like queer pieces, specifically for the second book. So I'm excited about that, and to see where I go with that. Um, yeah, that's basically what I got going on.
Where can our listeners go to get a copy of Ask Me Again?
So if you guys want a copy of my book, you can always follow me on Instagram at Vexed Poetry. That's VEXED Lex Poetry, and DM me for a copy. Um, I do still have quite a few copies left. I mean, I've gone through half of my supply, which I'm grateful for. So I still have a couple left. And yeah, you can just DM me, grab a copy, and I'll get it right to you.
All right, all right. Does anybody else have any questions for Lex before we are done today?
Yeah. Do you have any like public readings that you're gonna do with the book, like a tour of sorts, or any open mics you're gonna hit or things like that?
For the time being, I kind of not related to the book. I've thought about doing kind of like a tour, but again, I need to be more on top of things like that. As far as open mics, I try to do Zoom open mics here and there. Um, Trying to get better at in-person stuff. So I usually post, I try not to hold myself to it. Like if I mention if I go into an open mic, and then sometimes I just decide not to go. But I usually post on my story, if I'm going to an open mic. But on the top of my head right now, I can't think of any recent ones that I'm going to go to.
I mean, you're right there. The Bowery has taken over the
Yeah,
New Eureka, and you should jump in there.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Did you go to the Poetry Fest this year? The New York Poetry Fest?
No, every year I say I'm gonna go, and then I just end up not. Because I think it's because it's always so hot too. But I'm like, they
Yeah,
hold it in July, so
this year was a scorcher. This year
yeah,
was
I'm like,
crazy.
well, it is in July, so but I feel like this year especially, it was just like unbearable.
Oof. I went last year and it was unbearable. I say
No,
that as I'm sitting in Dallas, which is also unbearable.
I've gone once years ago. Probably I went a long time ago, but I definitely want to go now and show my book around and things like that.
For sure.
I have a
Um,
very important question.
it is
Yeah.
not going to be important. Go ahead.
Wow. Wow.
I just know how you are.
Oh, Shockie. Okay, so it has been a banner summer for queer pop. Do you have a favorite queer pop girly? Do you have a horse in that race?
If you say
I
JoJo Siwa, I'm going to end this block.
I um I do not have a horse in that race. I've heard about all the different
The Chapel
the
Roan, Renee Rapp, Brat
Yeah.
Summer. Yes.
Um, yeah, I don't have a horse in that race.
Okay.
I applaud everyone else's, that they go crazy for it. But yeah, it just hasn't been my thing,
Well,
surprisingly.
like a sommelier, if you are looking for a recommendation, may I recommend the Chapel Roan vintage because it's delightful.
I will take that under advisement. Thank you.
You mentioned Skillet. What type of music and things are you into?
So I do like a lot of pop music. I do like reggaeton, salsa, bachata, kind of a lot of music, some little bit of country. some rock. I'm kind of all over the place. If it gets me in my feelings, I'll like it. If it has a good beat, I like it. So I'm pretty well rounded with that kind of stuff.
Cool, cool, cool. Me too. Right. Well, if no one else has any questions, um, I've kidnapped you for about an hour now. I appreciate you coming out to the Out Loud podcast. It's our mission to highlight different queer artists and poets and creatives. So I'm happy that you came on and did some poetry. I hope to see more of you.
Yeah.
Definitely that second book. I'm gonna get your book, I promise. Don't let me forget. For sure. But other than that, I mean, nobody else got anything? Nothing?
Well, just wanted to say thank you, Lex, and I just really appreciate that vulnerability and that realness, And I loved that even though I have sort of a male body amidst my non-binariness, that line, we prefer to work with equipment that doesn't run out of fuel. That was like such an amazing burn. I love that.
Thank you. And yeah,
All
I
right.
definitely want to thank you all for having me, and it was a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Again, you can get their book either by going through DM or going to redorgreenbooks.com, which is also the same publisher for this Out Loud anthology that is a part of this podcast or the catalyst for this podcast. So please, please check out Red or Green Books. That's READ or Green Books. And link in with us. But other than that, thank you for joining the Out Loud podcast with me and Dougie Fresh and Starchild, and of course our beautiful feature, Lex. Lex.
Thank you.
Ow,
All right.
Woo.
why don't I know how to stop the recording? Oh my God.
New Facebook.
Got it. Cool.
All right. Great to see everybody.
All right.